A war planning chat, a journalist accidentally added, and now a national security controversy the Trump team didn't anticipate. In recent weeks, revelations about a Signal group chat involving Trump-era security officials have raised serious concerns, not just about digital security, but about double standards in how classified discussions are handled. One name in the chat stood out, Jeffrey Goldberg, a prominent journalist who confirmed he had been added by a Trump advisor. As legal experts weigh in, the question isn't just whether a breach occurred, it's why the same voices who once demanded investigations into Hillary Clinton's emails now seem silent or defensive when the spotlight turns inward. In this video, we'll break down the latest fallout from the Signal chat leak, including how the administration responded, why calls for an investigation are intensifying, and what this means for national security oversight moving forward. This analysis explores hypothetical scenarios based on recent reports and political projections. It aims to examine the legal and institutional questions raised, not to attack any individual. In 2016, the Republican Party centered much of its criticism around Hillary Clinton's use of a private email server during her tenure as Secretary of State. The argument was straightforward. Mishandling sensitive communications, even if not technically classified, was reckless and potentially dangerous. Congressional hearings were launched. The phrase, "but her emails," became a rallying cry among GOP figures and voters alike, emblematic of their insistence on accountability and national security. Fast forward to 2025, and many are now asking whether the same standards will be applied to a new controversy, this time involving members of Donald Trump's security circle. A private Signal chat used by Trump-affiliated national security advisors was reportedly the venue for detailed discussions about sensitive military plans. What made headlines wasn't just the content, but the fact that a journalist, Jeffrey Goldberg, was accidentally added to the group. Legal experts and political analysts have pointed out the irony. If Clinton's email use was grounds for years of investigations, then a real-time discussion of war planning on an unsecured messaging app with an unintended observer raises equally, if not more, serious concerns. Congressman Jamie Raskin even noted that this may be worse than what happened with Clinton due to the nature and timing of the communications. Supporters of the Trump team argue that the information was sensitive but not classified, and that the exposure was accidental. But critics say the issue is less about legal labels and more about judgment, oversight, and double standards. If national security was the Republican Party's red line in 2016, then why does the line appear so blurred now? This analysis explores hypothetical scenarios based on recent reports and political projections. It aims to examine the legal and institutional questions raised, not to attack any individual. As criticism over the Signal group chat mounted, Donald Trump Jr. quickly stepped in to defend the team, not by addressing the content of the leak, but by attacking the messenger. In a now viral post, he questioned the credibility of journalist Jeffrey Goldberg, highlighting Goldberg's Democratic affiliation and the political donations made by his wife, who once worked for Hillary Clinton. But instead of deflecting scrutiny, Don Jr.'s argument only intensified it. If Goldberg was, in fact, a known Democrat with ties to the Clinton circle, critics asked, why was he invited into a private group chat involving Trump's national security discussions in the first place? According to Goldberg himself, the invitation came directly from Trump-aligned Congressman and National Security Advisor Mike Waltz. The White House later confirmed the authenticity of the chat. In other words, this wasn't a case of a journalist secretly infiltrating a conversation. It was an internal error made by Trump's own team. Several legal commentators and political analysts called Don Jr.'s reaction self-defeating. Rather than clearing up the controversy, it spotlighted a major breakdown in judgment. Not only was sensitive material discussed in an unsecured group, but it was exposed because someone in the inner circle apparently didn't vet the participant list. To many observers, the moment captured a deeper contradiction. At a time when the GOP claims to champion national security, the oversight wasn't just about loose technology use. It was about failing to take the basic steps to protect strategic conversations. And when the fallout came, the first instinct was not accountability, but deflection. This controversy, now unfolding under heightened public scrutiny, raises a fundamental question. Can national security be invoked selectively, used as a sword against political opponents, but ignored when the breach comes from within? Contrary to early claims of media infiltration, journalist Jeffrey Goldberg didn't hack or snoop his way into a confidential group chat. He was explicitly invited by Congressman Mike Waltz, one of Donald Trump's national security surrogates. Goldberg later published a screenshot showing Waltz's invitation, which the White House confirmed as authentic. This detail matters. It reframes the incident not as an act of media overreach, but as a serious operational mistake by Trump's own team. To illustrate the gravity of the error, legal analysts have compared it to a corporate board accidentally adding a journalist to a Slack channel where merger plans are being discussed. Except in this case, the topic wasn't finances, but US military actions and strategic planning. One particularly striking moment came when Goldberg recounted how he remained in the chat even as members discussed potential military movements and campaign strategy, unaware or perhaps unbothered by his presence. He later described it as the most surreal access I've ever had. This wasn't a cyber breach, it was a human lapse. And in the context of national security, such lapses can carry outsized consequences. For critics, the Goldberg invite is more than a one-off blunder. It reflects what some experts call a casual culture of governance, where strategic decisions and sensitive information are handled with less caution than a high school group project. And in an era when digital communication tools are vulnerable to misuse or exposure, that casualness raises serious alarms. The controversy didn't begin because of investigative journalism or whistleblowing. It began because key figures in the Trump orbit failed to secure their own communication and may have underestimated the implications of who they allowed in. When pressed to address the Signal chat fallout, Trump's former special counsel Pam Bondi didn't focus on the contents of the chat or the risks involved. Instead, she pivoted, bringing up Hillary Clinton's email controversy and Joe Biden's classified documents case. This rhetorical move, known as whataboutism, has drawn criticism from legal analysts and political commentators. Rather than engaging with the current allegations, Bondi's defense strategy was to highlight past scandals involving Democrats, some of which have already been thoroughly investigated. For example, she claimed that the Signal messages weren't classified and then redirected the conversation to Clinton's private server and Hunter Biden's access to garage-stored documents, neither of which directly relate to the group chat in question. Critics argue that such comparisons confuse the issue and avoid confronting the current facts. More troubling for some observers is the broader implication if political figures only demand accountability from their opponents and deflect when it involves their own allies, then the concept of equal justice under the law begins to erode. As one former DOJ official noted, it's not about what the other party did years ago, it's about what this administration is doing now. Many experts acknowledge that every administration has faced security missteps, but what distinguishes democratic governance is the willingness to investigate wrongdoing regardless of party affiliation. The concern here is not just the original mistake, it's the refusal to even consider that one may have been made. In that sense, Bondi's refusal to engage with the content of the Signal chat has become part of the scandal itself, not just a reaction to it. To understand how dangerous this is, imagine a fire chief refusing to inspect a burning building because someone else once lit a match across town, or a hospital ignoring a patient's collapsed lung because the last patient had a similar issue and they happened to support the rival political party. It's not just absurd, it's reckless. It's not about Hillary anymore, said one former CIA officer in a recent roundtable. This is about whether the current administration is treating classified info with the seriousness it demands. The moment you tie national security to partisan loyalty, you break the system. Even some Republican lawmakers were caught off guard. Senator Tom Tillis, a conservative voice in defense policy, admitted publicly that the Signal chat was too detailed and deserved scrutiny. If someone from Trump's own party can say that out loud, why are others pretending it's no big deal? Think of it this way. If a military unit accidentally drops its radio coordinates into a public group text, the first reaction shouldn't be, well, remember what the other guys did 5 years ago. The response should be, how did this happen and how do we prevent it again? In a post 9/11 world where national security breaches can have real-world consequences, experts say the US can't afford to treat such incidents like partisan turf wars, because once security becomes optional, accountability disappears. And when that happens, the real risk isn't just political embarrassment, it's operational failure. What happens when powerful officials break basic protocol, but no one is held responsible responsible? That's the deeper concern emerging from the Signal Group chat scandal. Even as legal experts and elected officials call for investigations, no meaningful accountability has taken place. Key figures involved in the leak, some of whom reportedly discussed war operations in unsecured spaces, remain untouched. No hearings, no suspensions, no internal reviews. The result is more than silence. It's normalization. This absence of consequence reflects a larger trend, the quiet rise of impunity within the political system. In a functioning democracy, misconduct, especially involving national security, triggers checks, investigations, oversight hearings, public disclosure. But here, the system simply paused. It didn't act. That inertia creates precedent. Once you ignore a breach, you make it acceptable, warns legal analyst Ali Honig. That's how erosion happens. Not through drama, but through inaction. Real-world comparisons illustrate this danger. Imagine a commercial pilot caught using unsecured radio channels to discuss flight routes and passenger identities. If the airline shrugged it off because the pilot had friends in high places, the industry's entire safety structure would collapse. The same logic applies to national governance. Many experts warn that selective accountability, punishing one party while excusing another, undermines public faith. A 2024 report by the Brennan Center found that over 70% of Americans now believe high-ranking officials rarely face consequences for wrongdoing. That's not just a statistic, it's a warning sign. Even within the GOP, some voices express discomfort, yet no party leader moved to launch a formal inquiry. This reluctance to self-police isn't just political, it becomes structural. When systems stop correcting themselves, trust erodes quietly, and as this trust fades, so does the incentive to uphold standards. This moment may seem procedural, a chat log, a security breach, a few defensive press statements, but it carries a deeper implication. If internal misconduct brings no repercussions, what's to stop it from happening again and again? When institutions falter in holding public officials accountable, democracy leans on its final line of defense, the voters. The Signal chat incident, involving sensitive military discussions on an unsecured app with a journalist accidentally included, might appear like another Washington scandal, and until you consider what hasn't happened: no investigation, no accountability, no correction. Instead, partisan voices dismiss the breach or redirect blame, while legal oversight is stalled by political loyalty. In that vacuum, the responsibility shifts to the public. The challenge, however, lies in how voters respond. A 2025 Pew Research Center study revealed that while 65% of Americans across party lines say they're deeply frustrated by what they see as selective enforcement of the law, only 29% say such concerns strongly influence their voting decisions. This disconnect between outrage and electoral action has become a defining paradox of modern politics. Citizens express concern, even anger, but return to the polls without changing their political behavior. That inertia may be enabling the very conduct they oppose. Political scientists warn that this growing tolerance for impunity isn't accidental. As public scandals pile up with no real consequence, they become background noise, normalized, expected, and dismissed as just politics. Sarah Longwell, a conservative strategist, framed it bluntly: when misconduct is met with applause or indifference, it stops being misconduct, it becomes strategy. In other words, political leaders will continue crossing ethical lines until voters make it cost them something. Consider the broader effect. Every unanswered scandal erodes a bit more of the civic foundation. People begin to believe that rules only apply to the weak, not the powerful. That belief, over time, undermines more than trust in politicians. It chips away at trust in the system itself. A disengaged electorate doesn't just enable bad actors, it breaks democracy's ability to correct course. When violations of national security or constitutional process are met with silence, the real danger isn't just what leaders are doing, it's what voters are no longer willing to do in response. This is no longer about one chat thread, one official, or one administration. It's about whether the democratic system still functions when accountability becomes optional. The legal system can offer fines or hearings, but only the public can offer nor deny continued power. And so the question becomes, will voters recognize this breach as a moment to reassert civic responsibility, or will they look away again, leaving the next violation to feel even less exceptional? Beyond the immediate political spectacle, the Signal chat controversy underscores a larger and more troubling trend: the slow erosion of institutional trust in the United States. When national security officials can discuss potential military operations on an unsecured messaging app, and the response from political leadership is not reform, norm but deflection. The damage is not just procedural, it's cultural. It signals to the public that standards are flexible, and worse, that loyalty to party can outweigh loyalty to process. Many experts argue that this signals a turning point. We're seeing a normalization of improvised governance, says former DHS analyst Juliet K.M. Officials treat national security like a group text thread. It reflects more than a lapse. It reflects a mindset that formal rules are optional. In other words, it's not just about one mistake. It's about the erosion of a culture that once took those rules seriously. Public reaction to the Signal episode has been mixed. Some voters are outraged by the breach, while others dismiss it as exaggerated or politically motivated. This split is symptomatic of a deeper institutional fatigue, one where repeated scandals, investigations, and partisan clashes have dulled the public's sense of urgency. A 2024 Gallup poll found that only 26% of Americans say they have a great deal of trust in federal institutions. That number drops below 20% among younger voters. This distrust has consequences. When voters lose faith in neutral enforcement, they begin to disengage, or worse, radicalize. The line between oversight and persecution blurs, and public accountability becomes harder to achieve. If a national security breach like this can be dismissed as just politics, what happens when the next one is worse? What norms are left to break? At its core, this is not just a legal or partisan debate, it's a civic one. The institutions designed to protect democracy, the courts, the press, the intelligence community, rely not just on law, but on public belief in their purpose. Without that trust, even the strongest systems can falter, and when that erosion is met with silence or spin, it may not be obvious at first, but it's happening all the same. This analysis explores hypothetical scenarios based on recent reports and political projections. It aims to examine the legal and institutional questions raised, not to attack any individual. As the Signal chat controversy fades from news cycles, the most urgent danger may not be the breach itself, but how quickly it is forgotten. In recent years, the public has grown accustomed to scandals involving security lapses, conflicts of interest, and politicized responses. Each time, the shock diminishes, but behind that desensitization lies a real cost: the slow degradation of democratic accountability. What happens when mistakes at the highest levels face no consequences? When top officials can share sensitive military discussions in unsecured spaces, dismiss warnings, and then shift blame without investigation? The precedent extends far beyond any one administration. It tells future leaders that rules are flexible, oversight is optional, and political loyalty can substitute for institutional responsibility. Legal scholars have long warned about this slope. The moment institutions are no longer held to their own standards, those standards begin to collapse, says Professor Kim Lane Sheppel of Princeton. When the response to a security breach is not a bipartisan call for review, but a partisan scramble to redirect attention, it's no longer just an incident. It becomes a warning sign. In a healthy democracy, the public plays a critical role in reinforcing norms. Outrage is not always enough, but apathy is dangerous. If citizens stop expecting accountability, leaders may stop offering it. The lesson of this controversy may not be about Signal, or even about one official's actions. It may be about whether the system still works when stress tested. And so the real question now is not whether classified information was mishandled, but whether Americans are still willing to demand better. Because if the lines of responsibility keep blurring, what will remain of institutional integrity 5 years from now?